This episode fueled by mud water. Follow the link in the description to get a crazy deal on your first order of mud. My name is Michael. I've been absolutely fascinated by tabletop role-playing games for the better part of my life, and I strive to give my Monster of the Week party a fresh, new, traumatic nightmare after every gaming session. Welcome to Roll With Me. See, it's hard for me to pick a favorite anything, but if I had to pick a favorite role-playing game, it would be Monster of the Week. And if I had to pick a single gripe I have with people who play Monster of the Week, it would be how they handle combat. And I think it might be helpful to preface this with my opinion on combat in role-playing games in general, because I think the way that some people look at how combat is handled is a little flawed. We know that in Dungeons & Dragons or Pathfinder or what have you, a round is 6 seconds, and when you have a turn in an initiative order, you conceivably have 6 seconds to do what you're going to do. You can take a single action and a bonus action and maybe a free action to say something, right? But it's a span of 6 seconds, and we really got to let that sink in, because when we square off with an opponent and we have a 6-second window to make our attack, and we only strike once with a sword in those 6 seconds, it would look a little something like this. So we can clearly see that the rules of combat in Dungeons & Dragons, the concept of it, is a little obscured, right? If we are locked into combat, then we are engaged with our enemy. And if we are locked in melee combat, then we are trading blows back and forth and back and forth. And when it is our turn, it is our turn to take the offensive. And our attack roll signifies any number of strikes with our weapon, right, that then compile into the amount of damage we cause to our opponent. And if we roll under their armor class, then when it's our 6 seconds to make our offensive move, right, or when it's our time to make our offensive moves within the 6 seconds, I should say, we roll under their armor class, we don't land any hits on them. They're deft at deflecting our blows. Likewise, when it's their turn, right, if they roll under our armor class within the span of 6 seconds, then their amount of blows that they sent towards us don't land, and we have deftly blocked their blows, and we are unscathed, right? They get critical hits, right? A natural 20 lands a critical hit on you, right? And that just means that maybe every blow that they struck at you landed and found purchase, and therefore they dealt more damage, right, on their turn because of the critical success. It's not just blow for blow. I mean, with magical spells, it makes a little more sense, because it could take a total of 6 seconds to conjure the magic and use your material components and the somatic and all of that. You say your little hex and whatnot, and you cast your spell. Of course, that could take 6 seconds, but a single strike of a sword is not like that. And furthermore, in Dungeons & Dragons, people default to just attacking, and a lot of people won't use buff spells. A lot of people won't use situationally appropriate spells because they think that dealing damage is the most important thing. Similarly, when I see people in Monster of the Week playing in a combat, they approach the situation, as Helena Blavatsky would say, abominably literally, where they think the only thing that they can do is to strike. And that's not necessarily the best way to handle a combat in Monster of the Week unless you're specifically the combat player. And damage is its own monster itself, right? In Dungeons and Dragons, let's say you have 28 hit points. That means, right, that you can be struck a number of times and take 28 points of damage before you are knocked unconscious. But it doesn't translate literally into real life, right? Like, if a dagger does 1 point of damage and we have 28 hit points, then that means that as a human we could be stabbed 28 times before we fall unconscious. It's really not like that. It is an amount of damage that we take that we can sustain and keep conscious. The numbers are only applied because that's how we can track it through gaming, right? That we can't just give our bodies hit points in real life. It doesn't work that way. There's so much nuance and so many things and factors that change the variables of how our bodies work. We just can't summarize it in a number. And when we have a total of 7 harm that we can take in Monster of the Week before we die, we need to heavily consider the type of damage that is being caused to us, how severe this damage is, what the lasting effects on a real person would be. And so sometimes in combat, kicking some ass is not the greatest thing in the world, because the book clearly states that every time you roll to kick some ass, no matter what the result, even if you get a perfect success, you roll double 6s and you got a +3 to tough, you get a crazy high number, and it's a perfect success, you are always going to take damage. No matter what. You will always take damage when you kick some ass, unless you kill the monster in that one hit. Otherwise, you're always taking damage. And if you kick some ass 7 times, you will die. It's just gonna happen. It's how it works. Okay, so let's see what the book says about kicking ass. This is used when you are fighting something that's fighting you back. When you get into a fight and kick some ass, roll plus tough. On any success, total 7 or more, you and whatever you're fighting inflict harm on each other. The amount of harm is based on the established dangers in the game. That usually means you inflict the harm rating of your weapon, and your enemy inflicts their attack's harm rating on you. You can take 7 harm before you die. If you roll a 10+, choose 1 extra effect. You gain the advantage, take +1 forward, or give +1 forward to another hunter. You inflict terrible harm, +1 harm. You suffer less harm, -1 harm. You force them where you want them. On a miss, you get your ass kicked instead. You suffer harm or get captured, but don't inflict any harm back. So there are a few things to consider here. It is important to know, as the hunter, how much damage the monster can actually do, how much harm they can inflict on you in a single attack. And there are factors like armor or like tough hide. I think the Chosen has a move that they can become basically invincible. They have just a natural +2 armor. And so sure, they could go and spam kick some ass rolls at a monster. If it can only deal 2 harm and they therefore suffer no harm from it, it's possible the monster could be dealing 0 harm attacks that's just kind of pushing you around and moving you around. And it's also possible that you could have no armor on and the monster could be dealing 4 harm hits, and 1 strike back from the monster would leave you unconscious and unstable and dying. And that means that we need to be very careful about how we approach a combat. And there are other things that we can do to control the situation, because sometimes killing a monster or beating it down is not the way to conclude a mystery in Monster of the Week. So let's just see what the book has to say about reading a bad situation. When you look around and read a bad situation, roll plus sharp. On a 10+, hold 3, and on a 7 to 9, hold 1. 1 hold can be spent to ask the keeper one of the following questions. What's my best way in? What's my best way out? Are there any dangers we haven't noticed? What's the biggest threat? What's most vulnerable to me? What's the best way to protect the victims? If you act on the answers, you get +1 ongoing while the information is relevant. For example, if you ask for the best way into the monster's lair, you'll get +1 while you're infiltrating it. But once you're in, the information doesn't help you anymore. The bonus is only applied once on each roll, even if more than 1 question applies to your course of action. On a miss, you might misread the situation. Everything is fine here, it'll be totally safe to go investigate alone. Or you might reveal tactical details to your enemies, which means the keeper can ask the questions above of you. Taking the time in combat to read a bad situation can be extremely helpful to you and the rest of your party. You can add +1 to your rolls later on, acting on the answers you receive from reading a bad situation. You can effectively make yourself and your team better in the fight and understand what's going on with a much sturdier mindset, right? As we have surveyed the situation and learned about our surroundings and learned something about the monster that we are ostensibly fighting, right, we become more effective, right? And we're not automatically suffering harm because of what we're doing. And while we're on the subject of improving the game for our parties, why don't we look at how to help someone out? When you help another hunter with a move they are making, roll +cool. On a 10+, your help grants them +1 to their roll. On a 7 to 9, your help grants them +1 to their roll, but you also expose yourself to trouble or danger. On a miss, you expose yourself to trouble or danger without helping. Note that help bonuses do not stack. If 2 people help out, the hunter just gets +1 on their roll. So it seems pretty clear how the help out move works, but we always have to remember that Monster of the Week is not a game based on numbers and mechanics. It is a game based on narrative and conversation. And so there is no initiative order in Monster of the Week. Typically when I run a game, I will go kind of around the table left to right or something, or, we'll go clockwise one way and then counterclockwise the other way, or just how time-wise moves fit into the story, right? So your kick some ass roll, if it's grand and big and complex, could take some time. Reading a bad situation could take a moment or a split second or a couple minutes. It's all variable. It's all highly situational. Everything in Monster of the Week is extremely situational. So every time we help somebody out, we need to justify how that actually works, what it looks like, and how we're helping someone out. Of course, it could be possible that there's nothing we can do to help somebody out. We're on the other side of a room. We're not in the same location at all. They're trying to use magic, and I don't know how to use magic. There's a lot of reasons that we could not use this move, but more often than not, it can be extremely helpful in combat or in other situations, but we'll talk about that in another video. Of course, we could always use the move Protect Someone. If someone was about to suffer harm and you can somehow prevent it, then you can try to protect them. When you prevent harm to another character, roll +tough. On any success, 7 or more, you protect them okay, but you'll suffer some or all of the harm they were going to get. If you get a 10+, choose an extra. You suffer little harm, -1 harm. All impending danger is now focused on you. You inflict harm on the enemy, you hold the enemy back. On a miss, then you end up making things worse. Protecting someone is about so much more than just keeping them from suffering harm. You can change the entire flow of the combat by interrupting the attack of the monster. By jumping in and protecting someone, you could draw their entire focus to you, thereby giving somebody else the opportunity to do something, to lay a trap, to kick some ass while the monster isn't looking, to give somebody an advantage, right, in your party. These are all ways that we can make life easier for ourselves and for our party. I mean, shouldn't we want tackling this monster to be successful and have people survive instead of everybody just trying to beat a werewolf with a baseball bat until they die? Yeah. And last, but certainly not least, our favorite catch-all, act under pressure. This covers trying to do something under conditions of particular stress or danger. Examples of acting under pressure are staying on task while a banshee screams at you, barricading a door before the giant rats catch up, resisting the mental domination of a brainworm, fighting on when you're badly injured. When you act under pressure, roll +cool. On a 10+, you do what you set out to. On a 7 to 9, the keeper is going to give you a worse outcome, hard choice, or price to pay. On a miss, things go to hell. You can do so much cool shit with an act under pressure roll. Remember that as a hunter in Monster of the Week, you are the most badass. You are the top of the top, the best of the best, right? And everything you do is badass. And so when you roll to act under pressure, you can do any number of things that can affect the combat. It literally catches everything else that you could possibly want to do in any given situation. And sure, if you miss, everything goes to hell. But that happens if you miss on everything. Things go to hell in Monster of the Week very frequently. But like, acting under pressure is sometimes, no, more often than not, more effective than just kicking some ass. You can act under pressure to trap a monster. You can act under pressure to knock down a giant sign and crush the monster. You could act under pressure. So many things. The sky's the limit. It's all your imagination. It's all down to what you think is cool and neat. There's so many things you can do. Stop trying to hit a werewolf with a baseball bat. Know what I'm saying? Now, for the keepers out there, I will be making a separate video about how to run a combat and about how to use the threat moves and minion threat moves and all of the things that you can do as the keeper to pull the strings of a combat or of a situation to make it interesting and narratively cool and to make the situation dire, right? But it is important to remember, it is exceedingly important to remember that just attacking the party is not the only thing you can do with a monster. There are so many things you can do. Perhaps your monster is a sad, caged animal, and it's just lashing out. Maybe fighting the team is not its purpose. Maybe it just wants to not be a monster anymore. Maybe it's a dude that just got turned into a werejackal and he's freaking out about it, and you got to figure out how to cure him of his werejackal-therapy. I think that's a word. It's not a word. Or it's a ghost, a trapped soul. I once ran, actually I had a commenter ask about a sympathetic monster, if I ever run a sympathetic monster, and absolutely I have. I once had the party investigating a ghost that actually turned out to be an Acheri, which is a tortured soul of a little girl from Native American culture that becomes grotesque and demonesque over time, over hundreds of years of suffering and being lost in sort of the spirit wilds, and they captured her and sent her essence to the next life. And it didn't involve a lot of kicking ass. I don't think there was any kick some ass used in that combat. I think it was all act under pressure, read a bad situation, protect someone, and they won. And I don't think anybody took any damage. And it was an awesome fight, and it took like an hour of game time. But like, nobody died. Not even the ghosts. Monster of the Week is an incredibly narrative-driven and highly situational game. And so there is a lot of nuance that needs to be considered and applied to every session. And if we do it the right way, with the right amount of immersion and clever writing and good improvisation and grounded realism, we can make Monster of the Week the greatest role-playing game of all time. Thank you so much for watching. As it turns out, my new pet mimic Flopsy can only feed off of YouTube engagement, so please like, subscribe, and head over to my channel for more content like this to keep Flopsy alive. Do it for Flopsy.